then please request it again. And we'll win the competition. No, I get nothing from it. So we'll just be another screening. And I'm sure you can invite friends then and bring your own popcorn, etc. Okay, I think we were ready to make a start. I have to say I love the fact that I'm getting questions, which means that we are actually skin thinking, aren't we? We are thinking about our skins. We are thinking about what we actually do to them. We're thinking about how we treat them. And thank you very much to everyone for the advice and for the questions. I would like to, however, reiterate that I'm not a dermatologist, okay, by training. Number one, I know many dermatologists, and I have a reasonable idea of dermatological practice, as well as obviously the biological basis is more my focus. But I will endeavor to try to answer as many questions as you either lay in front of me or slip me as I'm walking out or come leave on the lectern. What I would do is I want to slot them in sort of as we go through the rest of this week. So if you just indulge me to complete the lecture, I'll try to shorten slightly my lectures tomorrow and Friday, giving us a little bit more time to possibly interact also not only from the written questions but also off the floor. All right? Is that okay with you? And then we'll try to get to them. Some of them, I must admit, I would have to go research some of the answers myself, just to make sure that I give you the proper answer. And even some of them, I may even give my favorite dermatologists a call and ask them about some of the advice. Who has a dermatologist? That they are fantastic. Okay, thank you. So you know that in that consultation period, you're paying for everything that you want to ask. And so when I visit them, I don't get charged. So I just ask them all sorts of questions. But so make full use of that. You're very welcome to take some screenshots of the slides and say, this is what Prof. David has said. Do you agree or do you not agree? If they don't agree, then you don't go back to them. No, I'm joking. Let's kick off this morning by looking at what we do to our skins. So at the start of this week, I gave us a good overview of what we're going to do with this adventure as we go through the week. And of course, I forgot to put my slide changer on. Apologies. So I can move your slides forward, but I will in a second. We looked at what skin is. Yesterday we concentrated on what tanning is all about and the effect of UV on our skins. And we also looked at the fact that we can protect our skins. We can protect it against the harsh realities of ultraviolet radiation, but also we want something that I did not touch on much, but I did show you, is that UVA, the A is that aging wavelength, right? And that UVA affects the underlying structures of the skin as much as the cells in the epidermis, the melanocytes and the keratinocytes. It also affects the collagen and the elastin. And so it slowly degrades it over time. The body recovers, of course. But over time, it gradually degrades it so that it does not recover. And so you slowly start to lose the elasticity. And you start to lose that nice bouncing back feeling. And when I've got a daughter that is 9 months old, and I squeeze her skin. They talk about the bounce back ability of the skin, right? Or yes, the bounce back ability. That isn't an English word. And so you squeeze it, and you check the elasticity by seeing how fast the skin actually reverts to its original shape. Okay? And so as we get older, you'll see that as you squeeze, it takes a long time to get back to its original shape. All right? And in certain areas, of course, the more unexposed areas to the sun, the bounce back ability is a lot bigger, is a lot stronger. And so that is really because that elastin and underlying collagen has not been affected. The one thing that I did not mention yesterday is that there's 1/3 cell type in the skin that sits in the dermis. And it's a critical cell type for the aging, and for the anti-aging, and for the anti-wrinkling. And that is the fibroblast. So the fibroblast cell is the cell that produces collagen, right? You kill your fibroblasts, you kill your collagen, right? And no matter how much collagen you inject as a filler, if you don't have fibroblasts, it will only last temporarily. And so the collagen will eventually dissipate, and you won't have cells that are actually regulating and upregulating its own. Now, why am I telling you this? Because in most moisturizing creams, and in most creams that we get cosmetically, they add compounds or vitamins that actually activate the fibroblasts. And so all your anti-wrinkling, all your anti-aging creams will have a certain amount of vitamin A or retinol incorporated in it, and the retinol itself acts on the fibroblasts to activate them to produce collagen. And so the difficulty that I always share with folks, and the same happens with skin lighteners, and we'll talk a little bit about that today. The same happens with skin lighteners, that the dose that you place on your skin is very well dermatologically worked out. So if the blurb, the insert in the box, says that you have to apply it twice a day, in the morning and the evening, it does not mean that if you apply it 3 or 4 times a day that it's going to work better, okay? And it's amazing how the mind works, that if it's working very well over a period of 3 days, if I then, and now you try to work it out yourself, they said that this is a course of 2 weeks, but it's working so well after 3 days, adding it twice a day. If I add it 4 times a day, I only need to use it for a week. No, okay? It is not mathematical. It does not work like that. The dose itself is regulated so that the skin gets that initial dose, and then you keep it constant over the period so that the fibroblasts, or the cells which are receiving the dose, use that time to regulate themselves, okay? To divide, to produce collagen, to help the elastin, etc. So I just thought I'd mention that as we go into this. Today we're looking at tattoos and a few other things that we do to our skins. And so I had to remind you again, although this picture is now superfluous because you've got it locked into your memories, that we have the 3 layers of the skin. And it really is important because today we talk about what happens if you get a permanent tattoo and what happens if you get a temporary tattoo. And so if we were to take a needle and we were to inject into the epidermis, right? And so here I have to ask, who has a tattoo? Okay, don't be shy. We're almost family by now. I'm not going to ask you where it is. I do not have a tattoo. There we go. Okay, and so who would have liked a tattoo? All right. Okay. Why have you not gotten to... never mind. We carry on. Okay, so there are 2 ways in which they create a tattoo. And tattoo artists are remarkable people. They are real artists, okay? Okay, some of them are shockers. When you say, can you tattoo the face of a lion, and you end up getting the face of a cow, you know, that's a tattoo artist that must not be around. But they generally use a needle. And the needle they use are really of the hypodermic, or of the very small hypodermic needles, almost insulin-like. And that is really designed to go into the skin. And what you want to do is, for a temporary tattoo, okay, you're going to inject the dye only into the epidermis. And why is that? Because a temporary tattoo, the dyes that they use are basically plant-based dyes, and quite a few of them are oil-based. As we inject the dye into the epidermis, you will start to distribute it within the epidermis. It will only last for about 3 or 4 months, or 3 to 6 months. And that is the time it will take for these cells at the base of the epidermis to divide. And as we said, this is a living organ. And so these cell layers are being constantly replaced. Okay? And they are replaced by the cells in what we call the basal layer of the epidermis. So the last layer of the epidermis before you get the dermis is called the basal layer. The cells that sit in the basal layer are exceptionally important cells, the melanocytes and the keratinocytes, but the specific cells in the basal layer are those cells that divide. And they divide into 2 cells. So one cell will divide into 2 cells. The one cell will remain a dividing cell, and the other cell will become a more mature cell. And so you get these cells dividing, and over a period of about 6 months, you will literally replace your whole epidermis. Okay? And so naturally, if you have a tattoo that is sitting in the epidermis only, through the process of cell division, you will eventually lose it. Okay? However, most of the tattoos that we have these days are permanent tattoos. And they will advise you, if you go to a very good tattoo artist who is not just in it for money, they will advise you that permanence actually means forever. Okay? You, of course, can have it removed. You can have it camouflaged. You can have it scraped and lightened. And I'll give you a funny story about that a bit later. But the permanence of it is real. And so as you inject it, what the tattoo artists know, because of course below this, and remember this is only 1 to 2 millimeters thick, below this is muscle and a whole lot of other things, and your bone. And so you don't want them to go into the muscle, right? Because that'll cause a whole lot of extra problems. And so they're very skilled in knowing how deep they need to go with their needle. But it is very easy for them to know. Why? Because the dermis contains the blood vessels. And so if you go into the skin, if you continue to go with a slightly thicker needle and you hit blood, you know that you're in the epidermis, that you're in the dermis. Okay? If you do not feel it as the needle goes in, you know you're in the epidermis. As soon as you feel it, you know you're in the dermis. Okay? And so because it contains nerves and blood vessels, they very much know that they're in the dermis. Now, of course, the person that they are tattooing, because these are nerves, and your nerves are directly linked to your brain, and it is painful, the person will tell them, ouch, you're there, and then you know. And then you'll continue to go for it. Of course, they rely very much on the fact that the dyes that they use are going to be activating the immune system. And the reason for that is that you want to activate the immune system effectively, because as soon as you activate the immune system, it increases healing. And so they sort of a dual role there. They want to know that you feel it, because then they know they're deep enough. They also want to activate the immune system by hitting some of the blood vessels and some of the nerves, so that you accelerate the healing process. Okay? And that's that. That is essentially a permanent tattoo. The dyes, different colors and remarkable pictures. And this, I just pulled out a couple of quotes from Nina Jablonski's book on skin that I just wanted to share. She speaks about tattoos as a lasting inscription, conveying the importance of belonging, commemoration, and protection. And it got me thinking, why would people want to tattoo themselves? All right? And it got me thinking further that there must be a myriad of reasons why people actually tattoo. They're very often related to stages of life. They talk about an MLC, a midlife crisis, for those who are beyond it or have not reached it yet. Normally associated with a Ferrari, or a Mustang. In the case of Guy, no. Generally, it is a lasting inscription. Whether it is commemorating a particular event, or whether it is commemorating a lost loved one, etc., it is there to increase the sense of belonging and the sense of commemoration. It can also declare a person's affiliation to a social unit. Now, this is a Myanmar lady, and in Myanmar, in the earlier days, they used to tattoo their faces with inscriptions that revealed what group in Myanmar they belonged to. And why did they do it on the face? Because that's the first thing you see. Okay? And so it is never covered, generally, and it speaks to your affiliation to that social unit. And so, look, we don't really find tattoos on the faces, although if you see some of the incredible tattoos and what these makeup artists do, you do get more sort of nicer tattoos on the faces. The one thing about tattoos is that they are permanent. And once you breach the surface of the skin, you really, and we'll know this, when you get a thorn in your foot, or whether you get a cut while chopping up the onions and the potatoes, whatever, that skin is never again the same, right? It heals virtually perfectly, and it is fully functional, unless the break is very deep. It is fully functional, but you can never really regain that unmarked clarity of infancy. And here I refer to my daughter again. She had a scratch on her face, and literally within 2 days, the scratch was gone, and it's perfect skin again. If I scratch myself, it will probably scar. If we scratch ourselves, it will scar, and the scar will remain. So you never can regain that unmarked clarity. In the West, tattoos have become symbols of numerous things. One of the things that they started with in the earlier days was that tattoos were literally just associated with the disreputable, with the prostitutes, with those going into prisons, etc. Today, that has changed, right? Tattoos are now part of life. They're influenced by celebrities, and they've become a very popular form of skin art. We use our skins as a canvas, and some use it more effectively as a canvas than others. Hence, David Beckham, if you don't know, on the right-hand side. Very often, there are messages in the tattoos. And whether those are messages of affiliations or commemorations or memories, they can work very effectively, particularly when they are associated with celebrities. What this does, and it's the same with skin lightening, is that it gives the art an attraction to the younger generation. Okay? If David Beckham is doing it, if Ryan Gosling is doing it, then it should be okay. And that's slightly on the scary side when we look at skin lightening practices. But an estimated 80 million people sport some sort of ink, whether it is a little butterfly on your shoulder, whether it is the name of a lost loved one on your arm, on your chest, etc. People who decide to get them, and this was interesting, this comes from some of the social pages. People who decide to get them generally have no regrets. Sometimes I find that a little bit hard to believe because, and I'll show you in a second, but generally you really need to think about it because it is a permanent tattoo, okay? It is going to be there forever. You can only remove it via a skin graft. Today, laser technology is fantastic. They can remove a lot of it depending on the inks that they have used and depending on the age of your skin. They are undertaken after much deliberation and forethought. Of course, that quote generally falls away if it's the morning after a big night of partying, very often with our teenagers, and they wake up and say, "Whoa, where did that tattoo come from?" All right, so not much forethought goes into that, but generally it is undertaken after lots of forethought. They explicitly lack the transience of a souvenir T-shirt or temporary hair color. Okay. Sometimes we think we're in this phase and we need to change our life somehow. We need to jack up our life, and so let's change our hair color, right? For this fresh look. Let's get a T-shirt. I used to have, I've actually stopped it now. I had a tradition that every country that I traveled to, every country and every city, I would want a T-shirt, an original T-shirt of that city. And I did that for about 5 years. Of course, I've got lots of T-shirts, but that's nice because I can put it on and then take it off at the end of the day and wear a different one tomorrow, you know? Nothing worse than waking up and looking at your tattoo and thinking, this is not what I asked for. Well, that's it. And lastly, it is often statements of romantic affiliation with a symbol. You've got cupids, and you've got hearts, and you've got arrows through hearts, etc. And you've got names, right? That is the worst part of it. To put a name, to use a tattoo of a name. So, for example, the guy who used the word, sorry sir, can you see the word Melissa? He started going out with Melissa. And then he broke up. But he had the permanent tattoo. And so he started going out with Melanie. All right? So he could camouflage that out. Of course, when he broke up with Melanie, he had to find his next girlfriend, who was Lisa. Otherwise, he was in trouble. Okay. So that is really what tattoos are all about. And of course, the bottom line is that everyone has a choice. You know, your skin, your choice. The advice here is that when you do choose, you need to know, you need to be aware of the effect. It is a permanent and a lasting effect. The second topic we want to look at today, and we spoke about it a lot yesterday, but I just wanted to add this today, is this desiring of darkness. And this is tanning. And so we get two types of skin darkening. We spoke about it yesterday. We spoke about the cause. The cause is generally UV, okay? And interestingly enough, those, you also get the reflection of heat also generates, also activates the melanocytes to produce pigment. And now, we didn't talk about that yesterday, and somebody came to me afterwards, I can't remember, but reminded me that ultraviolet radiation generates heat. And so you're not only directly activating the melanocytes with the ultraviolet radiation because they strike the melanocytes directly, activating them biologically, you're also generating heat in the environment, okay? And we don't feel it because the sun shines, heat is just there all the time. But generally, people, for example, that work in kitchens, that work in front of ovens for most of the day, they also tend to be slightly darker, okay? Because that heat, it is not ultraviolet radiation, but the heat itself leads to a propensity of the reaction or the activation of those skin cells. There are two types of darkening that we get. The one is the immediate pigment darkening. Now that is the darkening that happens just after you've received a particular amount of ultraviolet light, okay? It is the darkening that virtually you can walk out of the sun and under a tree or in the shade, and you will see that your skin darkens. But that is a transient darkening. So we call it immediate pigment darkening, and it's so hilarious because people that are looking to tan, they'll go into the sun. They'll walk out of the sun or they'll get home and they'll say, whoa, look at my tan. They wake up the next morning and it's gone. Okay? And what that is just a reaction of the cells together with your immune system in that environment of the skin to activate the pigment production, but it is in fact not a lasting pigment production. Why? Because the immune system surveys the entire system, that is your body, and will very quickly generate compounds and proteins that actually neutralize the darkening, okay? Because the darkening for the immune system is not a natural phenomenon. And so what I'm getting at is that if you go sit for 1 day in the sun, then you go home and you have a tan, that tan is going to last very short, okay, for a very short time. It is the facultative darkening that you actually want. And remember yesterday I said, when we spoke about the stakes, I said as soon as you know your MED, you can go into the sun for that amount of time that you've now wonderfully worked out for yourself. And so, you know, I go into the sun for 7 minutes. In fact, mine is 6.3 minutes. The last time I checked, I go into the sun for 6.3 minutes, and then I get out to the sun. And I do that over a period of 4 or 5 days. You are giving in the same way that we spoke about the doses that you need to put on your skin. You're doing exactly the same. And so you're slowly but surely adjusting, or your cells are slowly but surely adjusting to the fact that they are being activated slowly. They are producing the pigment, and the pigment is a lasting pigment because every day you're activating it within your MED, your 1 MED. And then you'll get facultative tanning, which is really what you want because that is a lasting tan. Of course, through the summer, the radiation differs, as we spoke about yesterday. Seasonally, it differs. You know, we do lots of things that cause it to increase and cause it to decrease, and that's just the way it is. But suffice to say that you need to remember that facultative tanning requires you to have a little tan, a little bit of exposure every day for a period, and not just one massive exposure. Not only do we get facultative and a beautiful overall tan and tone when we go that route, but a massive amount of UV radiation at once may give you the tan, but it's also damaging 3 or 4 times the numbers of cells that you hood through facultative tanning, okay? Through facultative darkening. So that's tanning. Now, my other hat that I wear, that I normally throw off and stomp on, is recreational tanning. Now, what is recreational tanning? Recreational tanning involves sunbeds, okay? Now, sunbeds, and this is where the dermatologists, particularly the cosmetic dermatologists and particularly the wellness centers, run when I come through the door. Because there is nothing, absolutely nothing good about a sunbed, folks. And I'm going to use a few minutes now through the rest of the slide to explain why. And fair enough, you can argue with me, and I would love to engage if you feel differently, but I will show you, based on scientific evidence, that there's nothing good about this. So what are sunbeds? Sunbeds are 97% UVA and about 3% UVB, okay? let me stand on the side. They're 97% UVA and 3% UVB. So now you're already getting a sense of, we said that UVA stands for the A, aging, and the B, burning, okay? So you're already 97% aging the skin that goes into the sunbed, all right? There is very little, virtually none, and the cosmetologists and the wellness centers argue with me all the time, and I always ask them to show me. There's very little regulation in terms of how much UVA and how much UVB you can give through a sunbed. Why? Because it is related to the globes that they use, or the lights that they use within the sunbed, okay? And we get UVA and UVB lights, all right? Generally, they try to mix it up so that you, as the consumer, don't really know. Well, the consumer doesn't really care because they're in the hands of the cosmetologist until Lester walks in there. And then I actually want to see the lights. And I want to go read on the light what amount of UVA or UVB is actually being expressed from the light, is being given off by the light. The problem with recreational tanning is that it has become a fast, quick, generalized way of tanning and has been caught up via the teenagers of our population, okay? And it is not so big in South Africa as yet, but in the US and in the UK, it is huge. And I'm going to show you some numbers that I'm sure will shock you. The habitual use of sunbeds under the age of 18 years has been biologically and categorically shown to increase the risk of skin cancer. This is a young 18-year-old skin that you're putting into an exposed bed, and all they do is cover your eyes, okay, which thank goodness for that, because you'd walk out blind if they didn't. They cover your eyes, and they ask you what parts of your body you'd like to tan, and of course leave that exposed, right? And so here's an 18-year-old skin being given 97% UVA and 3% UVB. There is nothing much else that they ask you before they stick you into this bed, okay? And now you know from yesterday's lecture already that there are quite a few things that you need to know before you expose yourself. I mean, never expose yourself to this, but if you were, or if you see teenagers being exposed, there are a couple of things you need to ask yourself. Number one, what is my skin type? Okay? Because they are not going to turn away a Fitzpatrick skin type 1 from a sunbed. They're not going to turn away a Fitzpatrick skin type 2 from a sunbed. Yet, Fitzpatrick skin type 1 has very little protection, inherent protection, and does not tan. But they're not going to tell you that because this is 800 to 900 Rand a shot. And they need that. And certainly 18 years, fortunately now, at the moment, 18 years is the limit. In South Africa, you're not allowed to be sunbed exposed under 18 years old. And at least they've kept that up, because that's the other thing that I speak to them about. Can I see your book if there's anyone under? No. So they just hate me there. So that is an 18-year-old skin. The scary bit is that 28 million Americans currently use artificial tanning. Yes. No. Artificial UV tanning via sunbeds. Why do they do that? Number one, there's a myth goes around that because they are a northern hemisphere country, that they do not receive enough UVA and UVB during the winter months in order to tan. That's crap, okay? You receive more than enough UV, you just need to know how to channel it and how to use it, all right? The other massive myth that is being carried on and that is actually spilled over into South Africa is that at particular periods, you do not want to wait to be tanned we just spoke about the dosages, right? You do not want to wait over 4 days or 5 days or 2 weeks to be tanned and looking beautiful for your matric ball, right? The quickest way to do it is to go for immediate pigment darkening, throw yourself into a bed, stay in there for an hour, and get exposed to 97% UVA, increase your risk about 20 times to cancers later on in life. But hey, I'm going to look beautiful for my matric ball. Okay? Those are parts of the myths and parts of the messages that are getting out there that you and I, as the public, and that's why we're here, part of the reason why we're here, is to dispel those myths and to say that you don't realize that what you do to your skin now is going to be seriously consequential as you go through life later on. And that the matric ball is only one night. And if he doesn't like you the way you are, then you shouldn't be with him anyway, right? So certainly we've found, and there have been lots of studies, where sunbed users increase the risk. So here really the majority of users, besides the 28 million Americans, the statistics are horrendously high as well. For the UK, particularly the northern Scandinavian countries, all right? Norway, Sweden, etc. Use millions of users using sunbeds. They have shown in various studies in Europe and in North America that you definitively increase your risk. And so what they've done is one study has followed a cohort of teenagers that they didn't consciously get the teenagers to use a sunbed. They found or recruited teenagers that had used a sunbed or sunbeds, found out how long they've been using it, and they fitted the profile. They then followed them for 20 years in one study. And it was a study of probably about 500 or 600 teenagers, all colors, all shapes and sizes. They followed them for 20 years, so they don't literally go and speak to them every year. What they do is they recruit the cohort, and then 20 years later they try to find where they are. And then they took their history, their dermatological records, and looked at whether they had, versus the control cohort who did not, obviously, whether they had increased their risk of skin cancer. And just about 90% of them did, okay? Had some sort of skin cancer, whether it be a basal cell carcinoma, a squamous cell carcinoma, or a melanoma. And that's not to say that over the period of the 20 years that they had increased by going to sit in the sun, etc. But the control cohort had been doing the similar activities. Why? Because they were in the same geographical region. And so literally the environment was the same for the two cohorts, and they could clearly show that about 90% of those that had gotten major amounts of sunbed use through their teens, through the late teens and the early 20s, had increased their risk of skin cancer. Now get this. There are more than 250,000 British children aged between 11 and 17 years using artificial sunbed UV tanning machines. And if you just walked around the UK right now, you will see that the amount of tanning salons have increased remarkably. And these are things that catch my eye when I walk around a city. That the amount of tanning salons have just quadrupled over the last 10 or 20 years. Because this is becoming the in thing. In Britain at the moment, and I think they've just about a year ago introduced the legal limit of 18 years old. But before that, for Pete's sake, you're putting an 11-year-old skin in a UV bed, and you're exposing it to UV that it will probably, in all of its lifetime over the next 20 years, will meet the dosage that you'd be giving it over a week or over 2 weeks via sunbed. And so it really is an issue. Of course, this, once again, has been driven by media, has been driven by advertisements of these very white-skinned people, and then plus sunbed, and these very white-skinned people looking very sad, plus the sunbed, and then they're looking very glad, right? Massive smiles, brown, relaxing on the beach. In this one, they're sitting in the igloo, and they're looking sad, and the next picture after the sunbed is them sitting on the beach, brown, happy, having drinks, etc. And so the media plays a massive role in driving a lot of these cosmetic fallacies, as I call them. Finally, in certain areas of Britain, 50% of females, they've found, between 11 and 17 years use artificial UV tanning. And this is as bad, okay? As bad. And why do I say that? Because don't forget that the propensity, you are exposing your entire skin to the UV. Very often, and we're all adults here, very often the breasts are much lighter than the rest of your skin. Why? Because they don't get exposed very often. And so females going into sunbeds generally do it topless so that they can, they can get a nice overall tan, right? The problem with that is that, as we know, UVA and UVB penetrates the epidermis and the dermis. The dermis has cells. The epidermis has cells. But below that, you're also activating the immune system. You're activating other cells that may become seriously damaged in the breast tissue, and so could as well lead to associative cancers later in life, okay? Besides skin cancers, you're getting an overall activation of the immune system. You're getting overall activation within the cells of the body. And so they've never proven it. They've never proven, for example, that an increased risk of breast cancer or associated cancers of the breast are associated with increased in UV or artificial tanning. But I'm sure that if they did, it may be quite high on the correlation statistics. But the big thing about these points to take home is that, first of all, you do not want to use a sunbed at all. If teenagers are using a sunbed because they have the choice when they're 18, right? You give them the keys of the car and the house, and that's it. You don't see them again until they're 30. But they have the choice. So whether you say yes or no, they may still use it. If they do use it, they should be over 18. And if they are over 18, they are sensible and adult enough for you to sit them down and say, now, I just went to a lecture series last week, and this is what we learned. And so be aware that this can happen, that artificial exposure does increase your risk, and that you may get skin cancer in the future. Okay, so that is my second bit of desiring darkness. My third topic this morning is aspiring to lightness. Yes, question.
You said, before you go on to 10, normally you have to ask yourself several questions, which these things don't do.
Yes.
But you only mentioned one, which is the Fitzpatrick skin type.
Yes.
What other question should you ask yourself before you go on to 10?
Right. So what's your MED? For example, do you really want to do this? That's actually the biggest question. Do I actually want to increase my risk of skin cancer when I live in South Africa and the UV and the ultraviolet radiation is high anyway? And do I actually want to do this to find love? Right? Is a very common question that teenagers may ask. And so, yeah, so I can go on. But I mean, there are the biological questions really relate to what type of skin do I have. And not to mention, there's something that we haven't touched on lots. And like I said at the start, I'm not a dermatologist, so I don't really want to go there. But whether my skin is oily or whether my skin is dry naturally is a big question. And whether you are producing sufficient oils, whether your skin is oily or dry, how does that relate to how ultraviolet affects it or not? And so those are more cosmetic and sort of dermatological questions. I won't get into it now, but if we do have some time at the end of this week, we may touch on it a little bit. What actually increases the oil levels naturally in your skin, for example? Yes, sir.
Do they have the means to monitor the light flux of these things vary, the lights vary?
Yeah, so that's an excellent question. Do they have a means of measuring the light flux in these sunbeds? You're talking about the sunbeds? Yes. And so I have volunteered to some wellness centers that I could bring a radiometer with me to come measure their UV light flux, and they just pushed me out the side door. So no, I don't think they do, and I really don't think it's very well regulated. Some of them even say, as soon as you're in the bed, as soon as you get too hot, let us know. I mean, really? Yes.
In some countries like Russia, they have very little sun in the winter.
Yes.
And they start the classes in the morning with the little children, they're naked, and they put these sunlights, I don't know what it is, to give them vitamin D.
Right. So as we said yesterday, the other serious point about that. So the question was, the issue was that in Russia, where they do not have a lot of sunlight during the winter months, and that is true. Don't forget, they still have ultraviolet radiation. They just don't associate it. You know, people associate the sun with ultraviolet radiation. Well, the sun's always there, and the ultraviolet radiation is always there. You just don't feel the warmth of the sun necessarily, but you may still be getting the radiation, which is important for your vitamin D. So even though you may not be warm, I mean, you know, very often in winter, our sun just feels like it's not heating up at all. We're still getting that irradiation from the sun. But it is a point that they put the little kids in front of these lights, or light therapy almost, to increase the amount of UV that they receive so that they can increase their vitamin D. I have heard of stories like that. I haven't really researched it much, but as we said yesterday, it would be necessary if indeed a country feels that they don't have enough ultraviolet radiation to convert, and remember we need UVB to convert the vitamin D to a soluble form that the skin can use, but nothing replaces, or the alternative is that they can supplement it, right? So you don't need to go the UV route. You certainly don't need to put kids in front of lights in order and use the excuse, as it were, that you need that for vitamin D. You can supplement vitamin D, and that works as effectively. And you then still would just you'd need a little bit of irradiation, because your levels would be high enough to be converted over time to maintain your vitamin D levels. Okay, I want to move on to this topic because it is one of my interests as well, as you know. Aspiring to lightness and skin bleaching or skin lightening goes with various names. Okay, some people call it skin lightening. Some people call it skin bleaching. Some people will even call it lighter tones, which is another thing, another topic that I can get into, where cosmetic houses use phenomenal words to sell their products. Some people will call it even tone or even lightening or night lightening. Whatever it is skin bleaching and skin lightening practices. Now, what makes J-Lo, one of my favorite actresses, Jennifer Lopez, want to convert from her beautiful brown skin, Fitzpatrick 3-4, to something like that. Okay? No wonder Casper left her. What makes Beyonce want to change from a beautiful Fitzpatrick olive brown, Fitzpatrick 3 and 4, to something that resembles a Fitzpatrick 1? Okay? We don't know. We don't know. It is a huge psychosocial issue. And then Michael Jackson, my favorite, to convert from his beautiful black skin. And remember, we spoke about the vitiligo aspect, so this is a little bit of an unfair question because it's a combination. But he really changed to something like that, okay? And for the longest time, the media and people in general thought or thinks that skin lightening practices is wrapped up in Michael Jackson. But it's actually not, as we heard yesterday. He actually had vitiligo. So he used skin lightening as a way to reduce the rest of the body that would have been transformed anyway over time in a very patchy way. He wanted to transform his entire body to light, okay, to white. As I said, the nose, the lips, and the eyes are not my issue. They do say that if Michael Jackson had to continue to live for the next 30 years, he'd have looked like that. Okay, we're moving on. We're coming local, and this is our local Kwaito star, Nomasonto Mashoza Manisi, and I've had the privilege of chatting to her lots. Mashoza is really a very big Kwaito star. And if you don't know Kwaito, feel free to go download some of her music. It's actually pretty good. Mashoza was very much in the media eye because she went from looking like that to looking like that. Okay? And when interviewed, they asked her why. And she said, I've been black and dark skinned for many years. I wanted to see the other side. I wanted to see what it would be like to be white, and I'm happy. And that is exactly what we are trying to get away from. Not only the quote, but the fact that she said, I am happy, all right? Which implies that she was not happy being black, right? The other thing she said is, when questioned a little bit further, she said, I'm not white inside, I'm not really fluent in English, I have black kids, I'm a township girl, I've just changed the way I look on the outside. Why? Okay? And so as we go through Africa, so that is just a local star. Unfortunately or fortunately, I don't have the time to go into it now, but I've spoken to her long and hard. We've been on lots of interviews together, and Mashoza has a slightly different story compared to what the media has portrayed it as. And that's the sad bit, because she's actually a very genuine person, and she used skin lighteners in a slightly different way, but it just got swept up in the whole skin lightener milieu and became exposed and blown apart. So there's some wonderful other quotes, and I'm not going to go through them all. I'm just going to highlight some of them. I believe that being fair was pretty, and we talk about the psychosocial aspect of skin lightening. Here it is right here. I used some creams then that everyone knew would lighten the skin. It was fine at first. Later, I noticed patches of my face getting darker. This is a woman from Kenya, and I'll come back to that. In many parts of Africa and Asia, lighter-skinned women are considered more beautiful, and in Japan, okay, we all know about the geishas, right? They aspire to be as light as they can, almost translucent, because that is associated with royalty, that is associated with a higher class, and that is associated with much higher chances of actually finding an ideal marriage partner. And that is very real. This was a quote from the South African Indian, the Miss South Africa India, okay, a couple of years back. I love it, and I wish I could swim in it. She's talking about skin lighteners. I travel to many Eastern countries and I get attention now because I'm so light-skinned. I wasn't fair and did not feel pretty enough. Now I feel beautiful. I know that people are looking at me because I look so much whiter. Okay? Some scary quotes. A Congolese hairstylist called Jackson Marcel, and this is also now highlighting the fact that more and more skin lighteners are being used by males, that he has been using special injections to bleach his skin for the last 10 years. I pray every day to God and ask God, why did you make me black? I don't like being black. I don't like my black skin. Okay? These are the types of psychosocial issues and quotes which stem from them, where you can understand where they're coming from, that actually lead to people aspiring to lightness, right? And very often it goes a lot deeper than just the skin color. And so that is why, as I said to you earlier in the week, it was fantastic to be able to collaborate with the social science and humanities as a biologist to try to get an insight into the mind and the psychosocial aspect of why people actually use skin lightening creams. Now, of course, skin lighteners are not all bad. We use it in the clinics. We use it in the dermatological clinics. I've already explained the Michael Jackson story, where if you get vitiligo looking like this, it is starting to spread symmetrically. The lady is not responding to treatment, and so she may be given the option of depigmenting the brown or the blacker areas of her skin to be completely white. The difference is that she does that in consultation with a dermatologist, and she is monitored dermatologically over time, and so we know the doses, we know how to apply it, we know where to apply it, and we follow her, and we eventually depigment her completely, which to her is a lot nicer than looking like a checkered, having a skin that is checkered. Ephilides, we spoke about yesterday, freckles, right? And there's a question on my lectern here about solar keratosis as well. Very similar in accumulation, okay? An accumulation of melanin concentration in the skin. These freckles, if they become excessive, we can, as in the dermatological field, you can apply skin lighteners into specific spots. Today we have a few other ways in doing it. We can also use lasers, and liquid nitrogen for solar keratosis, for example, tags and all sorts of things on your skin. We can use that to remove ephilides effectively. Melasma. I won't go into lentigo, but lentigo is really associated with solar keratosis and with a slightly aging skin where we get accumulation of melanin. Melasma is a very big topic that always comes up. Pregnant women generally have melasma, this pigmentation, this hyperpigmentation on their cheeks and in certain areas of their body. They dermatologically can be assigned to using a skin lightener, and then once again, just to relieve that pigmentation, you would not want it to become light, you just want it to be a shade lighter. Okay? Once again, only under dermatological consultation. So what are they? Skin lighteners at the moment consists of four, what I call the big four, and they're not all nasties, but two of them are big nasties. The one in the top left-hand corner is called hydroquinone. It is a derivative of benzene, and it is only allowed, and I say only allowed, clinically, it's a very important word there, clinically it is allowed at less than 2% in a cream. Okay? Hydroquinone in South Africa, let me get there. Hydroquinone in South Africa has been banned. Mercury, which is also included in skin lightening creams, mercury, only 1 part per million is allowed, right, in creams, dermatologically. In South Africa, it too has been banned. The scary bit is that both of these compounds are included in large amounts in creams that you may get at a station market, that you may get at a spaza shop, that you may have fibroblasts. It will only last temporarily. And so the collagen will eventually dissipate, and you won't have cells that are actually regulating and upregulating its own. Now, why am I telling you this? Because in most moisturizing creams and in most creams that we get cosmetically, they add compounds or vitamins that actually activate the fibroblasts. And so all your anti-wrinkling, all your anti-aging creams will have a certain amount of vitamin A or retinol incorporated in it, and the retinol itself acts on the fibroblasts to activate them to produce collagen. And so the difficulty that I always share with folks, and the same happens with skin lighteners, and we'll talk a little bit about that today. The same happens with skin lighteners, that the dose that you place on your skin is very well dermatologically worked out. So if the blurb, the insert in the box, says that you have to apply it twice a day, in the morning and the evening, it does not mean that if you apply it 3 or 4 times a day that it's going to work better. Okay? And it's amazing how the mind works, that if it's working very well over a period of 3 days, if I then, and now you try to work it out yourself, they said that this is a course of 2 weeks, but it's working so well after 3 days, adding it twice a day. If I add it 4 times a day, I only need to use it for a week. No, okay? It is not mathematical. It does not work like that. The dose itself is regulated so that the skin gets that initial dose, and then you can, some of them, I may even give my favorite dermatologists a call and ask them about some of the advice. Who has a dermatologist? That they are fantastic. Okay, thank you. So you know that in that consultation period, you're paying for everything that you want to ask. And so when I visit them, I don't get charged. So I just ask them all sorts of questions. But so make full use of that. You're very welcome to take some screenshots of the slides and say, this is what Prof. David has said. Do you agree or do you not agree? If they don't agree, then you don't go back to them. No, I'm joking. Let's kick off this morning by looking at what we do to our skins. So at the start of this week, I gave us a good overview of what we're going to do with this adventure as we go through the week. And of course, I forgot to put my slide changer on. Apologies. So I can move your slides forward, but I will in a second. We looked at what skin is. Yesterday we concentrated on what tanning is all about and the effect of UV on our skins. And we also looked at the fact that we can protect our skins. We can protect it against the harsh realities of ultraviolet radiation. But also, we want to, something that I did not touch on much, but I did show you, is that UVA, the A is that aging wavelength, right? And that UVA affects the underlying structures of the skin as much as the cells in the epidermis, the melanocytes and the keratinocytes. It also affects the collagen and the elastin. And so it slowly degrades it over time. The body recovers, of course. But over time, it gradually degrades it so that it does not recover. And so you slowly start to lose the elasticity, and you start to lose that nice bouncing back feeling. And when I've got a daughter that is 9 months old, and I squeeze her skin. They talk about the bounce back ability of the skin, right? Or yes, the bounce back ability. That isn't an English word. And so you squeeze it, and you check the elasticity, by seeing how fast the skin actually reverts to its original shape. Okay? And so as we get older, you'll see that as you squeeze, it takes a long time to get back to its original shape. All right? And in certain areas, of course, the more unexposed areas to the sun, the bounce back ability is a lot bigger, is a lot stronger. And so that is really because that elastin and underlying collagen has not been affected. The one thing that I did not mention yesterday is that there's 1/3 cell type in the skin that sits in the dermis. And it's a critical cell type for the aging, and for the anti-aging, and for the anti-wrinkling. And that is the fibroblast. So the fibroblast cell is the cell that produces collagen, right? You kill your fibroblasts, you kill your collagen, right? And no matter how much collagen you inject as a filler, if you don't, then please request it again. And we'll win the competition. No, I get nothing from it. So we'll just be another screening. And I'm sure you can invite friends then and bring your own popcorn, etc. Okay, I think we were ready to make a start. I have to say I love the fact that I'm getting questions, which means that we are actually skin thinking, aren't we? We are thinking about our skins. We are thinking about what we actually do to them. We're thinking about how we treat them. And thank you very much to everyone for the advice and for the questions. I would like to, however, reiterate that I'm not a dermatologist, okay, by training. Number one, I know many dermatologists, and I have a reasonable idea of dermatological practice, as well as obviously the biological basis is more my focus. But I will endeavor to try to answer as many questions as you either lay in front of me or slip me as I'm walking out or come leave on the lectern. What I would do is I want to slot them in sort of as we go through the rest of this week. So if you just indulge me to complete the lecture, I'll try to shorten slightly my lectures tomorrow and Friday, giving us a little bit more time to possibly interact also not only from the written questions but also off the floor. All right? Is that okay with you? And then we'll try to get to them. Some of them, I must admit, I would have to go research some of the answers myself, just to make sure that I give you the proper answer, and even keep it constant over the period so that the fibroblasts or the cells which are receiving the dose use that time to regulate themselves, okay? To divide, to produce collagen, to help the elastin, etc. So I just thought I'd mention that as we go into this. Today we're looking at tattoos and a few other things that we do to our skins. And so I had to remind you again, although this picture is now superfluous because you've got it locked into your memories, that we have the 3 layers of the skin. And it really is important because today we talk about what happens if you get a permanent tattoo and what happens if you get a temporary tattoo. And so if we were to take a needle and we were to inject into the epidermis, right? And so here I have to ask, who has a tattoo? Okay, don't be shy. We're almost family by now. I'm not going to ask you where it is. I do not have a tattoo. There we go. Okay, and so who would have liked a tattoo? All right. Okay. Why have you not gotten to... never mind. We carry on. Okay, so there are 2 ways in which they create a tattoo. And tattoo artists are remarkable people. They are real artists, okay? Okay, some of them are shockers. When you say, can you tattoo the face of a lion, and you end up getting the face of a cow, you know, that's a tattoo artist that must not be around. But they generally use a needle. And the needle they use are really of the hypodermic, or of the very small hypodermic needles, almost